You're listening to the DC Comics Chronicles, where we cover every adventure from the streets of Gotham to the skies of Metropolis and into the depths of Atlantis. With your hosts, Adam and Chris.
Welcome to another episode of the DC Comics Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Doing great, Adam. Happy to be joining you once again to talk some DC film stuff. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing well. It's always fun when we have DC content to review, especially a live-action film, because there's sometimes months, years in between those occurrences. So when we have it, it's always fun. And tonight we're going to review the long in development film version of The Flash that has been out for about 10 days now. And as usual, when a DC Films hits theaters, Chris, chaos abounds on social media. But we'll talk about the actual film itself and our thoughts on it in after the break. There's no brand new news regarding the DC universe or the DCU film slate in regards to what James Gunn has in store that we don't know of already. Superman casting is getting close, but we don't have that information, so we're not going to spin our wheels speculating who it could be. We already know the candidates. When the decision's made, Chris and I will share our thoughts with you on it. But we have to be honest, and we have to talk about the box office of The Flash. And things are not going as anyone hoped or thought they would. The film is struggling, Chris. As of this recording, domestically, it's made $87 point something million, close to 88. And worldwide, it's made 211 million, or thereabouts. That is a far cry from the month prior to the film's release. Box office tracking websites were giving their long-range tracking of anywhere between 115 million and 130 million opening weekend domestically. That didn't happen, obviously. And when that doesn't happen, when a DC film doesn't hit the mark that everybody hopes it should, there is pontificating, and people are doing what we do, which is podcasts. They write articles, think pieces, etc., on the whys and hows of it all. And within that why and how, you often hear nonsense. So I'd like to try and give rational reasoning why I think we're in this spot with The Flash. And then you can comment on what you think of my thoughts on it. But let me give you my reasons first. Firstly, it'd be ridiculous to dismiss all the extracurricular news, let's call it, and rumor surrounding Ezra Miller and his troubles. He's been there. There have been claims that he's done some things. The veracity and the factualness of those claims, I'm not here to speculate or say that they're true or not true. But that stuff has permeated to outside of the online comic book movie space. And I think it's partially affecting, not fully, but partially affecting viewership of this film. And I can say that confidently because I've been told by people outside of the Twitter sphere, let's say, that I know personally, that I haven't told anything about this drama, that they've heard on entertainment news programming and things of that nature of Ezra Miller's issues.
It's been all over social media too, so anybody on Facebook or Twitter could stumble across this stuff.
And when I've asked if they plan on seeing the film, right? And they're casuals, they're not hardcore comic book fans. Their answer is no because of the Ezra Miller drama. So I've heard it firsthand from normies, let's say, if you will. So I think that's had an effect. How partial or fully it's had an effect, I can't say, but it's had some sort of effect in my opinion. The other aspect is, I think, the connection of the Flash and the very entrenched connection of the Flash film to the DCEU. Now, hear me out on this. And this has nothing to do whether you love or hate the film. So let me parse that out right now. Man of Steel was divisive, correct? Some people loved it, some people hate it, and then there's people smack dab in the middle, like pretty much me. Even though I lean more towards the 3/4 of it, love it. Then came BVS, right? We know what happened in the second weekend of that film, correct? Like, I'm not making that up. It dropped like a stone, right? There have been 2 instances where DC film connected to the DCEU has found massive success. That is Wonder Woman at 800 and change million, and Aquaman that made somewhere over $1 billion. Correct? Is that fair? That's fair to say. And yes, Suicide Squad did surprisingly well.
Yeah, I think that made like over 700 million, which for that movie is really good.
So that has to count as well. But now let me say this. I can give you reasons why, just quickly, why those films did well. Man of Steel was the first new Superman film in a new continuity that didn't rely on the Christopher Reeve era. Okay? And so that was the first film since 1987 that didn't rely on Christopher Reeve and that continuity. Plus, if you remember the TV spots and trailers for Man of Steel, from the producer of the Dark Knight trilogy, Christopher Nolan, remember it was all over so that's going to help your box office at that period in time. Christopher Nolan was the man around Hollywood, correct? Big name, big cachet along there. That film made 150 million opening and did fairly well, let's say. We know now through news outlets and things of that nature that it fell, about 40 million shy of what WB expected. BVS opened huge. There's no denying that. 400 something million worldwide. Had things gone the way everybody thought they would, that thing would have made $1 billion. Should have, could have, would have made $1 billion. BVS, I don't care who made it. That was guaranteed to open huge. And 872 million, nothing to sneeze at. Let's call that what it is. It's a big number. But the studio, I guarantee you, and you can vouch for this, I can pretty much guarantee you that Warner Brothers wanted $1 billion out of that movie. Correct? It didn't do it. So Aquaman comes out, does well. Wonder Woman does well. And by the way, Suicide Squad, how was it promoted? Joker was heavy in the promotion. Harley Quinn, first time ever in live action, heavily in the promotion. And that one scene with Batman, heavily in the promotion. That's going to push it over the hump, folks. That's going to make it big. But again, we went from 115 with Man of Steel, 166 million opening weekend domestically for BVS, and 103 for Suicide Squad. You see where the trajectory is already going 3 films in? 115 to 166 is a jump, but then 166 to 103 is a drop. So Wonder Woman does well. Aquaman has the Christmas release. Again, here's why Wonder Woman did well. Pop culture icon before even appearing in BVS, correct? Fair to say? Okay. Gal Gadot was probably the most universally praised piece of that BVS movie, correct?
Everybody liked her.
Okay. Aquaman had Jason Momoa, who was a big star because of Game of Thrones, and a Christmas release date, which helped big time. And the Chinese market, for whatever reason, absolutely loved that movie, and that propelled it massively. The Chinese market is big with underwater stuff. Like just look at Avatar. So they're clear, and Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot are likable leads. that helps your film. Unfortunately, with the Ezra Miller situation, that's a tough sell. If he's the face of your movie, or they're the face of your movie, they're the face of your movie, that's a tough sell. So I think the DCU already starting on shaky ground with the first 2 or 3 movies being fairly mediocrely to negatively reviewed, and then the box office of BVS, that doesn't help matters, right? So every subsequent film beyond Wonder Woman that was connected, and Aquaman that was connected to the DCEU, struggled. There were no breakout hits. Like Shazam 1 did decent, nothing to write home about, though, in terms of box office. I like the movie, but in terms of box office, nothing to write home about, right?
Shazam 2 absolutely cratered.
Shazam 2 cratered. Birds of Prey broke even. I'll give it that. It broke even, right? But again, is that what you want when you put out a film? Probably not. Correct? Am I wrong in saying that? I'm not a studio executive, but just a hunch. You don't want to just break even. So Shazam 2 cratered. Birds of Prey broke even. The Suicide Squad, you can't really judge because it was released in the midst of a pandemic. But I will say, it did very well on HBO Max. As did Peacemaker. So those are the 2 outliers. But again, those were released during the pandemic. They're hard to quantify. So what I'm saying is I think the connection of the connection to the DCEU for The Flash, and specifically keying in on the Man of Steel events, which were, the Man of Steel was a controversial movie. If you're asking people, hey, remember this? Well, great. Yeah, the people that like it remember it. The people that didn't like it, why are they going to rush out to see that revisited? You know what I'm saying? So the connection to the DCEU, I don't think did it any favors in terms of like the staunch connection. Aquaman and Wonder Woman had the same leads, but there weren't many references to the rest of the DCU in those movies, if you recall. So that kind of, was kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. So there's that. The other thing that I think is contributing is, the changing viewership habits of people, combined with competition. Like if you go to the movies now, your options are the Spider-Verse movie, Transformers, there's Little Mermaid, there's still Guardians of the Galaxy floating around, doing well. Strong legs for that movie. And there's one more, but I can't. Did I say Little Mermaid? Anyway,
yeah.
There's about 5 or 6 movies, in addition to Flash, big movies, big tentpoles, that you have an option to see, right? And with the streaming window getting ever smaller, there are going to be people out there that says, you know what? I just went to the movies last week. I'm not going again this week. I'll just wait for X or Y or Z film to hit streaming. The changing landscape of people's viewership, I think, is part of the reason. Again, these aren't all, the main reason. They're part of the reason. And just, by the way, I just want to say, going back to the DCEU of it all, I'm not blaming simply Man of Steel and BVS performance for the thing. The subsequent patch job that the folks over at Warner Brothers of the previous regime tried to do to keep this struggling, continuity alive didn't help matters either. So it was the decisions of the studio heads, as well as the 2 movies that didn't resonate with everybody. It's both those factors. So I'm not just blaming Zack Snyder for anybody that's thinking that. That's someone. Warner Brothers' decisions after that movie didn't help matters either. Like I think, hear me out, Chris. As great as Aquaman is, as much as I love it, and the fact that it did so well, that's great for DC. But I think it was also a hindrance, because if that didn't hit $1 billion, they would have hit the reboot button sooner.
And we still have the sequel to look forward to coming up later this year.
Right, which I'm still going to watch and I'm still excited for. The last thing I think that contributed to this, aside to people's viewing habits, is the announcement of a reboot. Now that affects more, the online space than general audiences who don't follow this stuff. But I think it has an effect. there are some people that are out there saying, well, if this doesn't count, why am I going to bother going to the theater to watch it?
Right, because it's not enough to just enjoy a movie for the 2.5 hours that is on the
Exactly.
screen. It has to be part of something else in order for you to care about it.
You and I can enjoy a movie, but like that, because we're used to it. Like we grew up in the day where here's a Batman movie. We don't know if there's going to be another one. You better watch it and enjoy it and take it all in because you don't know. But I think that's part of it. So to me, all these factors are a reason why. I don't buy the superhero fatigue bullshit because Guardians and the Spider-Verse movie tell you otherwise.
Right.
I don't buy the idea that, general audience only cares about Batman. Really? Because there's two of them in the Flash. Why aren't they showing up if that's the case? So I don't think it's that either. So
I think everything that you mentioned is a legitimate factor that's going into this, and and then you also have like the Snyder Bros who are saying like, I won't support anything DC if it's not bringing back the Snyderverse. So they're going to cut themselves off from any potential enjoyment or joy or fulfillment that they could get from watching a movie because it doesn't exist in the continuity that they wanted to exist in.
And what's funny is this is the one that I think is most respectful of what came before because it's so connected to Man of Steel,
right?
And it has Ben Affleck in an awesome sequence. It has Gal Gadot, so I mean it's like the most connected of the bunch, and yet there are people out there that won't support it because, well, I'm not getting the 5-film plan. Okay, that's fine, but again, and to me, there is now a call from again, because the sky is falling, Chris. So there's a call from some fans. Well, just send Aquaman and Blue Beetle to HBO Max, and here's the other part of it: delay Superman Legacy. Now, folks, there's an 18-month delay between Aquaman 2 and Superman Legacy. There's plenty of time to market Superman Legacy as not being connected to what's come before. I don't think the box office for The Flash is going to affect James Gunn's plans because James Gunn cannot be crucified for this movie.
It had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is this: James Gunn's main focus is to make the best movie you can possibly make. The best Superman movie you could possibly make. And if you do that and market it correctly to signify that it's not connected to what came before, I think it'll be fine. But his main focus should be, how can I make the best Superman movie possible? Matt Reeves had that same mentality with the Batman, and look at how that turned out. So let's just relax. The sky's not falling. I think the DCEU brand is hurt. But I think you start putting out, movies that are disconnected from the old continuity, and I think we'll be okay. We just got to relax. It's unfortunate that The Flash isn't performing well, but if you loved it, you could still love it. I think as much as David Zaslav and James Gunn championed that film, in the back of their minds, given everything that's going on, they probably knew that this might be a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really saw it coming in at 55 million opening weekend.
Right.
Like, even going into the weekend, I was seeing estimates that were revised down to like 70 million, and it still came in 20% below that.
Yeah.
But you're right. This is the old regime. It's not the people who are in charge now who made this movie. And so we just have to look forward to what they're giving us next. And like you said, Superman Legacy is the beginning of that.
One final thing before the break, Chris. I want to get your opinion on this because here's mine. before The Flash came out, it was announced that Andy Muschietti would direct The Brave and the Bold. I would still keep him on as director because he did fantastic with the Batman portions of this movie, which we'll get into. But also, given everything this movie went through with reshoots, delays, the pandemic, the whole 9 yards, the fact that it even came out and was as good as I think it was is a minor miracle.
It had a lot going against it.
So I would keep him on The Brave and the Bold. I think that's a good hire. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed what he did with this film. Spoilers for what we're about to talk about. But I think that he has a good understanding of character, and I'm interested to see what he can do with kind of a blank slate to do a Bat Family sort of project. Because we saw his take on two different Batman in this movie, but we didn't see anything on the extended family beyond that and the Gotham verse. So right. I think he's a good choice. It's interesting that they made the call before they even saw the returns of this movie. They're already seem to have found their guy that they want taking on that property, and I think it's a good hire. I'm interested to see what he'll do.
I think that's more of a vote of confidence to him, and them saying, "Look, whatever happens here, if it doesn't go well, it's not your fault. Like, there are other factors involved here. Like, you did your best." And again, I think they had found if him directing Brave and the Bold was dependent on Flash's box office, they wouldn't have announced it the day before the film came out.
Right.
So, and besides, listen, here's the last thing I'll say on this. Before Dune came out, Blade Runner 2049 came out, and that didn't do hot at the box office, and Denis Villeneuve was given Dune and wasn't fired. So, if he can get more projects after a disappointment from the same studio, why can't Andy Muschietti? So I think it's a good hire. I think that'll be fine, and I think he's a good choice. And we'll tell you why he's a good choice when we discuss more of the Batman portions in The Flash, which we'll do right after the break. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
What's up, everyone? It's the Emerald Enthusiast. For all of your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows, which include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Power Rangers, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast. You can check us out on Podbean, and remember to subscribe right here on YouTube. That's the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. From the first podcast to the last.
And we're back. And as promised, we are going to finally review the Flash film, which has been long awaited. This movie was announced, I think, in 2015.
A long time ago.
And it's now 2023, and here we are.
And it's been through so many different creative teams.
Again, like I said earlier, the fact that it came out this good is a minor miracle. So, Chris, I gotta say, the beginning of this movie, it's a quasi mini. It's a Flash Batman team up, but also a mini Justice League mission. Was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and it reminded me a lot of the Justice League animated series. The interactions, and the way they used the Speed Force effect, I thought was really good in this opening sequence. So, we've got a situation in Gotham that Barry gets called to. Batman is chasing down Falcone's son, I believe, because he's going to release he's stolen a pathogen that, if released, would cause so many people to die. Meanwhile, there's to gather that pathogen. He caused I think Falcone Jr. caused an explosion at Gotham General, which Bruce calls on Barry to kind of get under control. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing Ben Affleck's Batman chase down Falcone on his Batcycle while Flash tries to minimize the damage at the hospital. The hospital building begins to collapse, and Flash has to save subsequently a ward of babies from falling out a window. So I gotta say, I love the Batman action of it all, the Batman action sequence. I thought this was some of the coolest chase sequencing and stuff that Ben Affleck got to play a continuation of that, like the hero Batman, which we saw parts of in Justice League, either version. But in a full-on Justice League, Batman is sort of relegated to minimal activity when he's battling aliens and things of that nature, right? But here we got to see him go full Batman because he's battling, Falcone's son, so he can really get into the nitty-gritty. But just the way he moved, the bat cycle, if you want to call it that. What did you think of all that from that perspective?
Oh, I really liked this opening sequence. It was very action-filled, but there was also a level of humor, especially when
Alfred.
Alfred is great. But when time slowed down and Barry was having to save all the babies, and his wrist alarm goes off telling him he is dangerously low on calories, and he passes by the babies to go raid the snack machine and get as many calories in his body as he can, and then he's back to the business of saving babies. Even one that he puts in a microwave, like a little baby burrito.
Right, and again, there's a lot of there were people taking this scene out of context. Oh, they're putting babies in a microwave. Okay, one, the microwave was not plugged in.
True.
Two, it was to save the baby from getting hit by collapsing debris. Like, it wasn't anything meant to be disturbing or disgusting. He's saving a baby's life, you fools! Like, I don't understand the problem with it. But I agree with you. I think visually it looked good. Like, we've had 9 seasons of the Flash show, which I loved a lot of it. But I think this, in terms of showing the Speed Force and that kind of velocity, but also slowed down, was on another level. I really appreciate it. I think that was an eye-catching opening sequence.
Yeah, you can see the increased production value over something like the CW series for sure.
And then we got the Wonder Woman rescue, where she saves Batman from dangling off the side of a bridge.
I was really excited to see Wonder Woman show up, because thankfully that had not been spoiled for me going into the movie, so I didn't know she was going to be in it. I did kind of grimace a little bit when they replayed her lasso of truth joke. In Justice League we saw it with Aquaman, whereas this time it was with Bruce, talking about his deep-seated feelings and stuff like that. So, I mean, I understand why it's there, and it got a good chuckle in the theater, but for me, I was like, we've already done that. Do we need
to? That's fair. That's fair. But for me, it's more just them working together. Again, it really felt like, and their friendship between the three of them.
And they explain why Superman can't be there. They show like a news clip where he's off dealing with something else, so that that's the reason they don't have the full Justice League. And the reason Cyborg's not there is because Ray Fisher is banned from Warner Brothers for the rest of his life.
Partially by his own nonsense.
Oh yeah,
but I digress. So I just liked the camaraderie between the three of them, more so than the joke, but the camaraderie between the three of them.
Yeah.
And again, it reminded me of the cartoon. So then we get into the speech where Barry tells Bruce about being able to travel so fast that he can travel back in time, and there's the reference to Zack Snyder's Justice League. what he did there, right? It was
Right.
a small reference to that. And he says, I can save my mom, my parents, and I can save your parents. And that's when Bruce tells him the whole, you can destroy, if you do that, you could also destroy everything. And he's like, the scars we have, we're meant to keep them and move forward. We're not meant to, to fix them. And he goes, there's nothing broken with you to go back and fix. And I thought, that was a poignant exchange because it reinforces the bond that the two of them have. And when Bruce even, admits to Barry that, that the obsession with his parents' situation has led him to be lonely, I think is very poignant. And, Barry's like, well, we can hang out more. We can, we can go to dinners and stuff like that. And it's like, maybe next time, kid. And that's the last time we see Ben Affleck's Batman. But I thought it was a very emotionally charged way to go out. And it just echoed the mentorship kind of relationship that Bruce and Barry have. And I really like to see, right? So then, we get a bit of Barry and Iris. And for the most part, I thought there were a couple of scenes where, she helps him kind of get the idea about how to go back in time without interfering with, anything, even though that's not how it works out. But for the most part, I thought Iris' stuff was kind of take it or leave it. Like,
yeah,
if she wasn't in the film, like, it wouldn't have really changed much of anything, right? But, he does. And I like the way they played her off as a like, it wasn't an automatic, oh my God, like, he's head over heels for her. And he can't think straight when she's around. And, it was more friendship that if there would have been more, it could have evolved into something later down the line than just, hey, straight away we're in love with each other and that's all we could think about. Like, I'm glad it was more of a friendship kind of scenario. But ultimately...
And they do kind of give a little background on that. Apparently they were sort of college classmates. I don't know if they were actually friends, but they knew of each other from college. So, it explains that there might have been a little attraction that existed before now, but just he never really acted on it or whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But and again, like I said, I love that. I like that it wasn't a full-on love, love interest, like right from the word go. You know what I mean? And nothing against Kiersey Clemens. I think if she had more to do, she could have done a good job. But it just wasn't. She didn't feel like that much of a necessity to the plot that we were about to go on.
No, the Barry Iris relationship isn't central to the story they're telling in this movie.
Which is a nice change from the 9 years of the TV show, where Iris says, we're the Flash, which I'm like, still, it's a cringeworthy piece of dialogue, but I digress. So Barry comes up with a bright idea because they give a little backstory about his mom and how she died. So basically, she had forgot an extra can of tomatoes to make tomato sauce at the grocery store. And she sends Barry's dad to go get the can of tomatoes. While he's out, she's murdered, and he comes home, I guess touches the knife and, ends up getting blamed for it, et cetera, et cetera. So there's video footage, but because Barry's father has a hat on and his head down, you never see his face, so that's not enough to exonerate him. So Barry comes up with the bright idea of, well, if I go back and just make sure she doesn't forget that extra can of tomato sauce, and I do it in a way where I don't interact with her, then it'll assuage Bruce's fears because I won't interact with anybody, but I'll be changing it enough that she'll still be alive. So that's what he goes and does. And he basically slips the extra, while she's not paying attention, slips the extra tomato jar into her cart, and away he goes. On his travels back through the Speed Force, and I love when he's traveling, he could see the events that he's already gone through.
Yeah.
Like we see stuff from Justice League, right? And all that kind of jazz. And it's done in a way like it doesn't look. It looks like computerized, like you could tell, but it's meant to look that way because it's like this Speed Force vision, if you will. Uh,
Yeah, it's not
and
supposed to be photorealistic. Everything's kind of off kilter a little bit.
and I like that there was a differentiation there. I thought it was pretty cool. So as he's going through the timeline to go back forward into present day, this is going to get weird. He starts getting chased by this dark flash, and then he gets knocked, awry, and then
he gets knocked out of the Speed Force into a different point in time than where he was trying to go. It's somewhere in the middle of where he was as a child at the grocery store and what we would consider to be present day.
Yeah. So he goes to his house, and his mom and dad are alive and well.
Not dead and not in jail.
They're asking him how was school. I guess college at this point. And this is where Barry starts to realize, wait a minute, something's not right in Kansas. We're not in Kansas anymore. And then as he's saying, oh, school is fine, he's coming up with the excuse, he looks out the window and sees his younger self and then proceeds to go tackle his younger self to avoid getting caught in this weird scenario. And then there's the whole thing of them meeting each other, and sort of our Barry explaining to younger Barry what the hell is going on, which is pretty funny. And our younger Barry is very much like the Barry that we saw in Justice League. More immature. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't mean this in a bad way. Annoying. You know what I mean? And so it very much harkens back to that Justice League iteration of Barry, the theatrical Justice League iteration of Barry, but also slightly more immature because he hasn't gotten any powers or hasn't gone through the experiences of what our Barry has gone through. And I will say,
he's a freshman in college,
right?
So, he's a typical 18-year-old kid.
They're not mature. Let's call it what it is, a spade a spade. And Ezra Miller, going all the way back to Justice League, hasn't been my favorite casting of the Justice League characters. I'll freshly admit that, honestly admit that. However, I'll give props where props are due. They did a fantastic job at playing the dual roles. Like, I got the impression that, like, I bought into the idea that these are two different people.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job with it. I think the storyline led itself to two Barrys being on screen at the same time for the majority of this movie, and I think they pulled it off really well.
Right. And then he realizes that to not change anything even further, this Barry needs to be hit by lightning. So he has to recreate like where he was at that moment in time. So he takes him to the lab, the Star Central City. I'm getting my locations mixed up here. My DC fan card is going to be taken away. So he takes him to the lab through all kinds of shenanigans. Both Barrys get hit by the lightning. And the corresponding after effects of that is younger Barry has speed powers. Our Barry doesn't have speed powers any longer. And so then as they're both trying to come to grips with this, our Barry realizes, or they see on the a news report of the Zod arrival from Man of Steel. So Barry's big idea is, oh, we'll just go find Superman, and he'll fix this. And younger Barry's like, what's a Superman? Because Superman has not made himself public at this point. So then the two Barrys or our Barry, along with younger Barry, is on a mission to, all right, we got to find Superman. So then we get so current day Barry is playing around with his powers. He's all excited, all the nonsense, and he's going through all that, which is very fun, very funny. Having Barry kind of give his younger self tutelage is pretty funny because he's now in the Bruce Wayne role that Ben Affleck's Batman had to play in Justice League of trying to rein him in and get him to focus. But all the while trying to find where Clark is. So they go back to younger Barry's apartment. All these Clark Kents, none of them lived in Kansas.
13,000 Clark Kents in America.
Yeah.
Seems like a lot.
And not one of them is Superman. So that explains why the world is in the state it is. In our world and in the fictional world. But so Clark Kent is not an option. So he's like, all right, Wonder Woman. Well, Wonder Woman is a medium in Vegas, I believe, if correct. And it's not Gal Gadot by any stretch of the imagination. So it's like, all right, we'll call Arthur. We'll call Aquaman. To which there's jokes about, what is he, a fish man? Right? And so he calls Arthur Curry. And we find out that...
No, he calls Thomas Curry.
Sorry, Thomas Curry, yeah. The
father. Arthur's dad.
Yeah, Arthur's dad. And he's like, can I talk to Arthur? And he's like, you want to talk to my dog? And he's like, aren't you a lighthouse keeper? And he's like, yeah. Didn't you marry the Queen of Atlantis? And he looks over at his wife, and it's not Nicole Kidman. It's somebody in sweatpants and eating a plethora of snacks. So he basically hangs up on Barry because he thinks it's a prank call. All the while, we meet younger Barry's co-apartment inhabitants, I believe they are, and it's a bunch of college people getting drunk and stoned and typical college kid cliches. But there was one exchange that I think is pretty funny, and that is the whole thing about Back to the Future and how our Barry is like firmly staunch in the belief that, yeah, that's Michael J. Fox. Because he's like, oh, good, at least you have Back to the Future here. Like some things. It's like, yeah, that was one of Michael J. Fox's best roles. And the one stoner guy is like, Michael J. Fox. He's like, you mean Eric Stoltz? Which was a nice, funny play on the fact that for 6 weeks in the real world, Eric Stoltz filmed scenes as Marty McFly for Back to the Future. So I thought that was very, very cool. I like that.
Yeah, it was a good nod, and it was a funny joke that they played out for a good few laughs there. I liked it.
Right, it was a good joke. And then he's like, "Well, does Batman exist in this world?" And then one of the roommates does the I'm Batman voice, and she's like, "Of course he exists." And like Barry's like, "Great." Our Barry's like, "Great. We'll go get Batman. Batman will fix this." So they go to Wayne Manor. Off to Wayne Manor they go, and it's the Tim Burton Wayne Manor.
But it is in a slight state of disrepair, from what we remember.
It is in a little bit of shambles. But I like that when we get in there, we're treated.
There's no art. There's just an old kind of out of the game Bruce Wayne living by himself there, and there's no Alfred to make sure everything gets taken care of at the house.
See what happens when you don't have an Alfred? But the cool thing was when we go in, we see the room with the statues. Remember from '89? I like that little touch how we passed the room with the statues.
Yeah, that was cool.
The entrance of Bruce Wayne into the proceeding, where he tries to defend his home with a
Frying pan.
frying pan uh, was funny, but kind of proved that he was still badass.
Yeah.
Uh, and I like how they called back to the moment where Bruce throws the frying pan as if it's a batarang, and I believe it's young Barry like catches it like our Barry did in Justice League, caught the batarang. It was a parallel on that scene, which I liked. So then they go through the whole explainer. He says that I haven't been Batman in years because Gotham is safe. It's one of the safest cities in America. It doesn't need Batman anymore. Barry tells him about Superman, and that's where we learn that there is a Kryptonian captured by the Russians, right? They go through some more conversations. At first, Bruce wants no part of it, but then, the two Barrys go down in the Batcave anyway and use the computer to try and figure stuff out. Bruce is watching from the upstairs in the manor, and our Barry makes an impassioned plea about being sorry that Alfred's gone, and talks about at least some things are the same. There's always an Alfred, and I'm sorry for your loss. And so the mention of Alfred kind of gets Bruce back in the game. So Bruce agrees to help them, and the first way they think of doing that is to kind of get our Barry his powers back. So we get the scene of Bruce helping Barry electrocute himself. And it doesn't work at first.
I really liked the bat-shaped kite that they used.
Yeah, that was cool.
To conduct the electricity from the lighting. That was really neat.
Now, so I jumped ahead. Before the actual experiment of getting him his powers back, they go save the Kryptonian, correct?
Right. So they discovered through the computer that an unidentified ship landed somewhere about 30 years ago, and they track it to. Is it Siberia? I believe it's in Russia, but I think it's in Siberia.
Right. I think you're correct.
An underground fortress where this being is being held, and as comic book readers and as Flashpoint readers, we know it is so that the Kryptonian will be kept out of the sun so their powers cannot generate.
Yeah.
And that the rescue sequence is intense, man. It's one of my favorite sequences in the film.
I got to tell you, man, watching Michael Keaton's Batman during that rescue sequence was phenomenal. Seeing him move like that, I know a lot of it was CGI. I'm not stupid.
Well, yeah, and stuntmen.
Yeah. I understand a 7-year-old can't actually move like that, but it's a comic book movie. We're allowed to have fun with these things, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, remember last week we did, or last time we recorded, we did our top Batman moments in live action film.
Mm-hmm.
The Supergirl rescue is up there. It's on par with the market. So then they do rescue Supergirl, and we have they get caught, they're surrounded, and then Supergirl Kara at this point makes her big entrance. She just demolishes the soldiers, in confused rage, which is often par for the course with the Supergirl that's just been discovered, whether it's Flashpoint continuity or regular continuity or what have you. So she saves them. She's brought back to Wayne Manor. We also see Zod causing the chaos. At first, when Supergirl comes to, she realizes the lay of the land, what's going on. she tells them that, yeah, I'm not Kal-El, I'm Kara. And then she sees Zod and she's like, at first she's reticent of help. She doesn't agree to help them because of what the humans did to her. So she takes off and figures, I'll take care of this myself. And goes and she's about to confront Zod. And she sees how he's wantonly, just killing soldiers and things of that nature. And she eventually goes back. But that's when we see, it's after that point where we see the thing with Barry where they do the experiment with the kite. It fails. And that's when Supergirl comes back and flies him up to the sky.
It's a shot that everyone saw in the trailers and wondered, who is that being carried by Supergirl?
Yeah.
It's our Barry.
Yeah, it's our Barry. And so he does it. He's rescued, and then, she talks about how Krypton was not a violent place. It was a peaceful place. It was all about hope. And because the two Barrys and Bruce showed kindness to her, she agrees to help them take on Zod. That's when we have the alternate Barry make his costume from the remains of an old Batman Returns costume.
Yep.
That's where we get the "you want to get nuts, let's get nuts" scene, which I still smiled when I heard it, even though I heard in the trailers it didn't matter. So there's also some emotional tension here because the Barry from the past finds out why our Barry is here, and he finds out that his mother dies. So that gives him an increased motivation. And I like how our Barry blurted it out because that Barry was still not taking things seriously and being an idiot. And so in a fit of anger, he's like, you take everything for granted. You think you're so cool, you think you're... And it gets around to, I wish I still had Mom. And that's what, eventually he finds out. And that sort of sets him straight to, like, wanting to help out. So then it's off to the battleground, I guess you will, the desert, where they all confront Zod. Michael Keaton's Batman via the Batwing.
Which is super cool in this movie.
Oh, it's so awesome. Just the way it moves, it's bigger. Obviously seats 3 people.
The way the pilot seat inside the pod stays stationary as the Batwing rotates around it.
That was really cool. Yeah, I like that. And then the two Barrys take on some of the Kryptonians while Kara goes directly after Zod. Now, the cool thing is our Barry telling younger Barry that while the Kryptonians are stronger, they are faster. So they can, as long as they don't get caught by them, they can do some damage. They can at least hold them off long enough for Supergirl to get to Zod. Well, Supergirl takes on Zod, and that's where she learns that Zod intercepted baby Kal-El's ship and tried to extract the codex out of him, but in the process killed him. So that's why Superman ain't around in this universe.
He says the infant did not survive.
Yeah.
Pretty chilling.
It was. Michael Shannon.
He's not in this movie a lot, but when he's in there, he does his work.
And he's one of the best DC EU villains that we've had in this whole 10-year run. Supergirl gets some good hits in, a lot of good hits.
Mm-hmm.
She does impale him with some kind of pipe or some kind of remnants from a ship that is looks like a pipe of some sort. But then she makes the mistake of freeing him. And we learn that she's the one in this universe that has the codex embedded with her in her. So Feora comes in, saves Zod, and subdues Supergirl long enough for Zod to stab her with that extraction device and get the codex. Meanwhile, Batman tries to attack Zod's main ship. Its defenses kick up and start firing. So, realizing that he's got no hope, he's like, "Well, if I'm going to go down, you're coming with me." And he takes out the ship. And so he
in a suicide mission with the Batwing.
Exactly. And the two Barrys seeing this were like, no, we're not going to let this stand. Let's go back a few minutes and try and change this. So each one's got their mission. One Barry's going to save Bruce, the other one's going to save Supergirl. That's the plan. So they go back a few minutes. Kara still gets stabbed with the codex removal device. This time, Batman gets, is taken out of the Batwing, descends down. But I guess it was Namek, the big tall ass Kryptonian from Man of Steel. Batman's fighting him. Again, there's some cool moments for Batman, but ultimately, he's against the Kryptonian with no kryptonite. He gets mortally wounded. Barry says something like to the effect of, I think it was our Barry, where he says, I tried to bring you back, meaning I tried to go back and stop this. And Bruce says, you already did, meaning getting him back into the world as Batman was the way of bringing him back. And he's like, oh, I can go back and fix it. He's like, no. He goes, maybe, he goes, the world needs Batman. He goes, maybe some other time, kid. So he echoes what Ben Affleck told him in the previous timeline. So our Flash realizes that these are fixed points in this timeline. The only way to correct them is to go back and stop his mother from living, essentially. So he starts going back. Younger Barry won't accept that and wants to stop all this from happening. So he keeps going around and around trying to fix things. And what we realize that he's gone back so many times, and in Flash time, so many years, that the younger Barry essentially becomes the Black Flash that we saw knock Barry off course earlier on. So now there's three of them, and they're all having this philosophical conversation about, listen, as much as we want our mom, we can't let this stand, right? So they're having this philosophical debate, and then you see like the multiverse is collapsing as they're having this heart-to-heart. And we see different areas of the multiverse. So what we see, George Reeves' Superman from the Adventures of Superman TV series. And when I heard the intro, it's a bird, it's a plane, and I'm like I was smiling like a 6-year-old, right? Then we saw it was
Batman 66.
Was that first? Yeah, because I think it went in chronological order. I think you're right. We heard Cesar Romero's Joker laughing and saying some, and we saw Adam West Batman, which again was still smiling. Then we saw Helen Slater's Supergirl, and then descending beside her is Christopher Reeve's Superman. My smile got bigger. By this point, I'm looking like the friggin' Joker from 1989. I was so happy. And then we got something that honest to God, I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. We see Superman from behind, his cape flowing, long hair, and he's fighting a giant mechanical spider. And as
I
I
believe
saw
it's a Thanagarian snare beast.
yeah, well, that's what Kevin Smith calls it. So as I'm seeing this from behind, I'm like, this is all. They're not. He's not going to turn around because in my head, I'm like, there's no way that they got Nicolas Cage to come and do this. He turns around, and it's Nicolas Cage's Superman fighting that giant Thanagarian snare beast, as Kevin Smith calls it. Now, all these cameos made me happy, Chris.
Yeah, it was really cool to see.
I don't know how, if you're a DC fan, you cannot watch that and smile. But instead, what have we been treated to since then? Oh, the CGI looked terrible. It didn't. But when you leak shit via a cell phone, of course it's not going to look great. You morons. That's number one. Number two, here's the other complaint I heard. Bringing back dead actors, it's necromancy. To which I reply, where was that complaint when Star Wars did it in Rogue One? Or the last Fast and the Furious movie, when we saw Paul Walker's face? I didn't hear those complaints. But now, because DC's done it, it's necromancy. The other thing I'd like to, and you correct if I'm wrong, Chris, when they use this kind of technology for deceased people, I'm pretty sure they have to get the consent of the estate or the family member, correct?
I believe so, although I bet those rules are going to change with actors now signing contracts that will, allow certain studios to use their likenesses later on in life. Like I'll bet that's being written in the contracts like right now. But that technology didn't exist 30, 40
Right.
years ago
Sure.
for these instances that we're talking about. So I think you're right in that for people who have already passed, it has to be in some way okayed by their descendants or their estate.
If these cameos are in there, they've been okayed, and I'm okay with it. Now, had Christopher Reeve Superman and Helen Slater's alive, so it's a different ballgame. But Helen Slater's, let's just say Christopher Reeve Superman for the sake of the argument, had he come out of his portion of his universe and interacted with the three Barrys and helped in the climax of the movie and started talking, maybe I would have had a little bit more problem with it. Maybe it would have been a little creepier. I don't know. I can only say that if that actually happened. But for the milliseconds that we got of him, I was happy to see him.
Yeah.
And, I never thought I was going to see Nick Cage as Superman battling that spider. Back in 1997 or 98 when that movie fell apart, I don't know that I wanted it. Like, I was very scared of that movie coming out. How's that going to be? I like seeing it here. And if they did an animated movie based on that movie, like a direct DVD animated, I'd happily watch it. So I love that. As a lover of DC history, I loved all that stuff. It made me happy. So then, in the end, our Barry wins out and decides, I'm going to go back and change this. And he's got all kinds of garb to disguise his face, right? And there's one moment where he interacts with his mother. And she sees him, and she sees that he's getting emotional. So she offers him words of encouragement because he says, I miss my mom and blah, 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 blah. And she says, I'm sure that your mother would be proud of you. And so she goes in and gives him a hug. I got to say, I was getting very emotional at these scenes. Like, I had tears in my eyes. They were very effective. And Ezra and and the actress who played his mother had fantastic chemistry. I thought it was really heartfelt, and it really showcases I think, the character evolution for Barry Allen, like how far he's come since we first saw him in Justice League, whichever version you want to watch. Like there's character growth there, and he's making the hero sacrifice. You know, the sacrifices that these heroes have to make, right? Like, you know, for the greater good of the universe, I have to let my mother go. I thought it was very powerful, and kudos to both actors for the performances they gave. Um, um, so then we get to the end of the film, like the final. We're at the courthouse. Thanks to Wayne Enterprises, there's the cleaned up footage that now shows that Barry's dad was getting the extra tomato can, at the time that his mother was being murdered. So he's exonerated. There's a scene where
and the reason that we can see his face now is because even though Barry goes back and takes the can of tomatoes out of his mom's cart so that she still forgets it, leading to her death, instead of putting it on the bottom shelf where the tomatoes had been, he rearranges the shelf so that the cans are on the top. So now, when that footage sees his dad isn't looking down at the bottom, he's looking at the top, so you can see his face now.
So he's exonerated. We get a scene at the courthouse steps with Iris and Barry. You know, she says, "You should ask me out on a date." That's fine. She goes off on her own merry way. Then he gets a phone call from Bruce Wayne. He's like, "Oh, thank God! I'm so happy to hear your voice. I can't wait to tell you everything I've been through." He's like, "All right, I'm pulling up now." And the funny thing is, the phone says Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Like the voice is muffled, so you can't. Like I couldn't tell. I'm like, is that Ben? I can't tell if that's Ben Affleck's voice. I can't tell if it's Michael Keaton's voice. I don't know whose voice that is. And the car pulls up. It's the same car that it's Ben Affleck's car. Out, you see the Bruce Wayne's legs. You see people crowding him, and then all you hear is Barry say, "Who the F is that?" The crowd parts, and George Clooney's Bruce Wayne walks up to Barry, and he goes, "Wait a minute." He goes, "You're Bruce Wayne?" Oh, no, he goes, "You're Batman?" And Bruce looks at him and says, "Barry, what's wrong with you?" And then smiles, and that's basically the end credits of it all. I've got no problem with George Clooney showing up in this post-credit scene.
No, it was cool.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was a nice nod to his tenure as Batman, even though, look, it's not the best film, but he's part of the Batman legacy. And I'm glad that was acknowledged. And
not only is it acknowledging his part in the Batman legacy, but in the context of the film, it's showing Barry that even though he tried to make things, quote, normal again, he still changed things by moving the tomato cans. And now, because of that, there's a new third Bruce Wayne coming into his life.
Yeah.
So he has altered his present / future even by doing something as small as changing where the cans were located.
So I thought it was really cool that you know, George was there, that he agreed to do it. Kind of signals, I've put the negative connotations regarding my time in that role behind me. So good on him for doing it. No, I don't think that means that he is now going to be Bruce Wayne in Brave and the Bold. I don't think that's what that means. It is what it is. And in the DCEU, when it goes on in people's minds, because it's not going to continue past this point, unless George Clooney shows up in Aquaman, which I doubt Aquaman 2, which I doubt he's going to do now. this is only this ends here. And in our mind's eye, when we think of this iteration of the Justice League, just imagine that George Clooney's Bruce Wayne is Batman. That's all it is. Then we get a post-credit scene where it's really jokey and goofy with Arthur Curry. He's drunk and falls into a puddle of water. But the point of that scene is Barry is explaining that in every universe you still look like you. There's a Bruce Wayne that's Batman, but he looks different in every universe. So that jokey scene in and of itself is telling the audience, if they pay attention, that there are different Batmans, different continuities, and they all count. That's what that scene is saying. So anybody worried, oh my God, they're going backwards and George Clooney's Batman. No. Just pay attention. And it's telling you. So look, the fact that Aquaman was there, it was a goofy scene. It's fun. Like, again, have fun with this stuff. It's fictional. It's comic books. Have fun. It's okay. Not everything has to be dark and dour. There was a great balance of serious and fun in this movie. Yeah. It's okay to have both. Like, it really is okay. So that's the end of the film. So Chris, what are your thoughts on the end before we you touched on it already, but
I like the way they wrapped it up. Barry has learned a lesson about altering time for his own purposes and the ramifications that it can have. Mm-hmm. In the larger conversation of the DC universe, I'm not sure where this fits in as far as where we're going forward. But I'm glad we have this movie, and I'm glad Ben Affleck had the opportunity to end his Batman tenure on a little bit of a higher note. I'm glad after what happened with the Batgirl movie that we as the public got to see Michael Keaton's Batman one last time, if it is indeed the last time. And I'm glad that we got to see a little bit of a fun joke with George Clooney giving a little bit of a callback to his time in the Batman costume. I'm sure he was only on set for one day, but that was probably a fun day on set. And kudos to everyone for keeping their mouths shut, because I didn't know about that going into the movie. I had a good time with this movie, man. I saw it with my kids. We saw it the Saturday after it came out, so I had to kind of avoid the internet for about 2 days going into it. My son is 8 years old. He loved the movie. My daughter is 10, and after the movie, she even said, "Dad, I didn't want to see this movie. I didn't want to tell you that because I knew you were excited for it, but I'm glad we went to see it because I really enjoyed it." So
that's awesome.
Everyone in my family had a good time with the movie. It's one that when it comes out for home ownership, I will buy it on 4K. I'll put my money where my mouth is because I enjoy the movie, and I'll support it.
Yeah, like I said, I had fun. I thought we got character progression for the Flash. Ezra Miller gave their best, performance in this role. I think throughout the course of his time in this role, I got to see Michael Keaton probably one last time, and I got a cool statue that I never had when I was younger because of it. So that's a win for me. I got to see, much like George himself, I've reconciled my hang-ups with Batman and Robin, and I had fun seeing him again to acknowledge his time in the Batman role, and I got to see Nicolas Cage, as Superman, something that I never in a million years thought would actually see the light of day. This was a love letter to DC continuity on film, and it was a damn good Flash movie, and I'm glad it's happened. I'm glad it's here. Through all the ups and downs of the DCEU, it happened, and regardless of my stance on various different movies, I'm glad we have these movies. And this was a good close. If Aquaman proves to be a standalone adventure, so be it. And now I'm ready for what James Gunn has in store. So it's all good. But if we had to grade this thing, letter grade, what would you give it, Chris?
I give this movie a B plus. It's not quite on A level for me, but I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fun movie, and I'm sad that, based on the box office, we might not see a continuation of this character in this storyline. I would really like for that to happen, but overall, I enjoyed it, and I will recommend it to other people. And like I said, I'll buy it when it's out to own.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I didn't have any major issues with it. I'm gonna go ahead and give it an A minus. Just because, again, it gave me things that I never thought I would see. It was part of a larger multiverse, but it also stayed squarely on the Flash. And you know, I really had fun with it. Like it's one that I think will have a high rewatchability for me. So
Yep.
it's an A minus for me. And like I said, for those people that haven't seen it, give it a chance. See it for yourself. But I have a feeling that it will have a better life on digital and home media, despite its box office troubles. So I look forward to people discovering it, and hopefully the narrative will change around it. But I had a blast, and I'm glad I saw it. So it's an A minus for me. So that brings our review of The Flash to a close. But if you want to talk with us about the film or anything else coming down the pipe for DC in the future, you can on social media. Chris, where do they track you down?
Well, I'm on Twitter. My handle is at Chris N. Harrelson, or you can search for Commodore Schmidlap and you will find me. And then Adam will get this video up on the YouTube channel. And so if you have any comments there, I should see them.
Awesome. If you want to track me down on social media, it's at Adam_LeafsFan on Twitter. The podcast network has its own channel at MMNPDC. Chris mentioned the Facebook group. The link is in the description below. Click that. I will add you. And we can continue the conversation there if you so choose. But until next time, remember that The Flash is forever. From his first interaction with a Batman to the last. So long, everybody.